Aaron champion. All right. Enough with all the sentimental crap. Miles, you might actually be worse than Ricky Saints with all the pandering to these basic civilians.
John Cena, Randy Orton, Brock Lesnar.
I'm going to give you yours. Miles, you want a battle royal.
And
a battle royal on a fluke. A legitimate 1 in a million chance thing actually came true. You know what? They're actually riding very sorry to some close action here. So, what are you going to favor? And I'll say very close
going on, guys? Thank you so very much for joining us right here on Tuesday night. It is Tuesday Night Titans, episode 95 for your Tuesday, May 13th, 2025. I'm your host, JD from New York. As always, joined by the one and only, and if provoked, he will definitely beat your ass, the Solomon. What's going on, buddy?
Beat your ass. That's what it is. I sounded so ridiculous saying that. People got a kick out of me talking slang apparently on the show. They were like, can you just repeat that and say that again?
Bro, I gotta be honest with you, man. I was on my way to Target, and I was laughing so hard with you reading that because I had the YouTube video on. I replayed it like 3 different times, and I laughed every time I replayed it.
Beat your ass, huh? I'm not even sure what I just said, but Ricochet said to Ron Evans.
Oh my God, man! Social media, man. What would we do without it, man? Live a healthier life. I'll tell you that right now.
I feel dumber for social media just existing.
I don't know, man. WWE PC and AEW attendance numbers being thrown around in arguments. It's crazy, man. I don't know what's going on nowadays, but we got an action-packed show here tonight for episode 95. Thank you guys very much for joining us here. We have almost 1,000 people already in here. Thank you guys very much for that. Tonight, we have Sabu. We'll definitely talk about Sabu and the unexpected passing of one of the most legendary hardcore wrestlers, probably the most legendary hardcore wrestler of all time, in my opinion, especially for our generation. Sabu, we'll definitely get into that and the controversy surrounding what happened on social media this past weekend with GCW and Joey Janela. We'll definitely get into that. Triple H, apparently, the rumor is he may be loading up all-in weekends, and I don't know, man. One of the more petty things that I see WWE potentially go out there and do. Nothing's official yet, but we may have a triple threat of shows from WWE and AEW on the same day. So we will definitely talk about that. We got news on the WWE draft. We got Backlash discussion, John Cena, Gunther, Bill Goldberg, AEW free agency news. We got a lot to get into tonight, so thank you guys very much for joining us. Make sure you guys follow us on social media and all the YouTube stuff linked down below. Please make sure you guys hit that thumbs up. Let's try for 1,000 likes is the goal. We hit it every single stream, so tonight should be no difference. Thank you guys for some great numbers last week. We did over 41,000 views on TNT episode 94. And super chats are open. Get them on in. It's the best way to support what Jason and I do here on Tuesday nights. So we'll hang out with our cult beverages as always and go through your questions, comments, and concerns. All right, brother, I'm leaving it in your hands. Where do you want to go? What do you want to talk about?
Well, we should probably talk about what you mentioned at the top with the very surprising news about Sabu. WWE paid him on Raw last night. They had a more of a slideshow than and a graphic at the beginning of the show. I talked about it on my show this weekend because the news actually broke as I was recording the sound off. And I got a text message and I was like, what? So I went online and sure enough, I saw the news, so I was able to talk about it for a little bit. Just kind of off the cuff. And, you may have been more of a regular ECW observer, back then than I was, because I wouldn't call myself a huge ECW guy back in the day. Like, I was aware of it. And when I would check it out, Sabu was obviously one of the top stars on the show, and he was doing a lot of crazy stuff. But it was very surprising because also he was just in the news a few weeks ago on WrestleMania weekend. He just had what was supposed to be his retirement match against Joey Janela. And now all of a sudden we're hearing that he's dead at the age of 60. So that was very sad.
Yeah, I woke up with that news and I'm like, it's just randomly out of nowhere. It's like, what the fuck's going on? And it immediately brought me back to thinking when I first got into ECW. My parents were very strict on what time we were allowed to stay up. Like when Monday Night Raw first hit the airwaves in 1993, I was not allowed to stay up to watch it. I usually have my dad tape it and I'd watch it the next day on VHS when I got home from school. And then when we got a little bit older, my mom let us, stay up till 11, and then as soon as it's over, we go right to bed. ECW was on a completely different stratosphere. I mean, it was airing at like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning here in New York City on several different networks.
It was even later than that. I mean, it would come on MSG Network sometimes at 3 a.m.
Yeah, it was very, very late. So obviously my parents were never going to allow us to stay up that late. I don't really think that they cared what we were watching per se, but it was just the time in which that show aired. So I went to Mount St. Michael High School in the Bronx, and through freshman year into sophomore year, I remember this kid that was in our class. His name was Joe Aceto. I don't know why I vividly remember his name. I know what he looked like. He was a big wrestling fan. We were all big wrestling fans. We all kind of gathered in the parking lot before the bell rang for homeroom. And we talked pro wrestling. You know, I was pro WWF at the time. There were a lot of people that were WCW. You don't watch WCW? No, man, I'm watching Monday Night Raw. And then I'd hear back quickly to exchange stories about what we watched and what we heard on Monday night during the Monday Night Wars. And then ECW got brought into the discussion. I'm like, I don't know what that is. So, you know, I'm unaware that he was buying, he was taping shows, and I bought a tape from him. And then that's obviously how I got introduced to ECW. And then obviously from there, I mean, it was just a rabbit hole of who the fuck is this guy? What's this? Sabu, Ron Van Dam, Samuel Raven, Tommy Dreamer, Shane Douglas, you name it. Chris Candido. And Sabu obviously was one of the names that stood out. His act stood out more so than anybody. And, you know, I mentioned on Twitter just briefly just his feuds with RVD, his feuds with Jerry Lynn. You know, they really kind of hooked me as a fan for life. And he not only was an innovator, you know, you might not like the style of hardcore wrestling, but, you know, he's influenced that type of pro wrestler, and he's influenced even some of the people that we see today with the stuff that he used to do. And he will go down, as far as I'm concerned, in my opinion, the greatest hardcore wrestler of our generation. I know Terry Funk is in the discussion. I mean, that was well before my time. I caught Terry Funk a little bit too late in the game. But as far as what we know of our generation, Sabu was the cream of the crop for that type of style.
Well, not even just the hard, like really violent hardcore stuff, but you know, he was just doing stuff that was innovative and nobody else was doing here in the States at the time. So all the springboard moves and all the, you know, the high flying moves, which do not always look pretty, you know, he would do them, and he kind of became known for like botching moves and stuff. And it became part of his charm. And I think he would say sometimes he would do it on purpose. But he was doing crazy things. In fact, WWE on the Vault channel the other day uploaded one of his earliest tryout matches, which was from '93. And he was wrestling Scott Taylor, who would go on to become Scotty Tsunami. And the things he was doing then, this is '93. Like, you just didn't see people in WWE doing that back then. And the fans, I was more interested in watching the fan reactions. And they're seeing him do some of the same dives he would do in ECW later on. And they were like, wow, like, we're not going to see this at the taping, you know, later this afternoon. So that was kind of interesting to see. But you mentioned the hardcore style, and I always think back to that Terry Funk match, which I've talked about on my show before, which I think was the Born to Be Wired show back in '97. And that has to be one of the, if not the most violent match in ECW history. And it's not just Sabu, but it's Terry Funk, who at that time was fucking old. And the things that Terry Funk was doing, and they end up entangled in barbed wire, and they had to be cut out with wire cutters. Like, it was sick stuff. You know, to the point where Paul Heyman said, we're never going to do another barbed wire match like this ever again. But Sabu didn't care. You didn't even look at the guy, and what did he have all over his body? Scars. Like, he had scars all over his body, and that was the match where he had to tape the wound shut on his arm. And he sent Fonzie out to go get super glue. And they have like high medical grade type super glue, but this was like, no, just go to 7-Eleven and buy a tube of super glue. And he super glued the wound shut and went on with his business because he was crazy. He was crazy, but that's what made him unique. And so, yeah, he had a little run there in WWE many years later, but, you know, like with a lot of the ECW guys, it was very watered down. Just the idea that he even wrestled John Cena is just kind of crazy to me to think about. He had one WrestleMania appearance, which was 23 in Detroit. So you can say that he had a WrestleMania match to his resume. But yeah, I mean, the people that he influenced, it's countless You have people who grow up watching someone, and that one person strikes a chord with them in some way. And you wonder how many wrestlers, Sabu's that guy. Maybe made them want to become a wrestler, or made them a fan in the first place. So his style is still emulated today. As far as what happened there at the end, he was in terrible shape. I mean, if you just saw him in recent years doing interviews or convention appearances, he did not look well. And I believe his wife passed away a few years ago.
Yeah.
And so he was. I don't know that he ever recovered from that. He seemed to take that very, very hard. And he had a lot of substance abuse issues. I don't know what his status was these days as far as that goes, but not surprising, given the style that he worked. I'm sure he was in pain 24/7. But then there was all this talk about this retirement match, which I want to say they were going to do earlier, like previously. I don't, maybe it didn't happen, but then it finally happened over WrestleMania weekend at the GCW show. And I wasn't watching the GCW show, but I did see clips from the match. And even in that match, in the state that he was in, did you see some of the bumps that he took in that match?
I did see some of the clips on social media.
I mean, the one bump where he fell out of the ring and just landed on his head on the concrete. And I think they kept the camera off him for several minutes, and yet, he got back into the match and he finished the match. And it's like,
that's what he wanted, though. That's what I mean. Yeah, that's what he wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, he went out having a Sabu style match. If this was ECW 30 years ago or 25 years ago, that's exactly what he would have done. He would have been like, fuck you, I'm going back in, I'm going to finish the match. So, but again, 60 years old in the state that he was in, it was sad. I mean, I can see where fans of his would look at that and go, okay, that's the Sabu that I know, and that's what Sabu would want. Well, sometimes what Sabu wants maybe isn't the best thing for Sabu. And I just was watching some of these clips, and I'm like, how is he even allowed to be out there in the first place? That's what I was saying weeks ago when I was seeing the clips. Forget the fact that now he's passed away, but I'm like, this is just crazy.
Well, I know you mentioned, his wife passing. I didn't really dive too deep into that, but I did see a couple of people that supposedly had known him personally on social media within the last 48 hours say exactly what Jason said, that he never really got over it. He was just emotionally distraught, even today over that, rightfully so. Painkillers, drugs, despite being as famous as he is in the pro wrestling sphere, never a millionaire. He worked into his 50s doing indie shows and indie appearances. He could barely walk. He was all ravaged and beaten up, obviously, from the style that he worked. I did Thoreau, he actually no-showed the Indie Hall of Fame in 2023 in New York City. He no-showed, but he didn't no-show because he didn't want to be there. He no-showed because he had physical limitations that made travel near impossible. And he also said that he didn't want to take the spotlight away from everybody else that was there to solely be on him.
Well, what was it, that show? Because there was a show where supposedly he was there, but he didn't want to come downstairs.
Oh, that was this year. Last year, WrestleMania Philadelphia. Yeah. He was legitimately in the hotel room at the Sheraton, and he was there. He didn't want to come downstairs, and he was upstairs in the hotel room. But the thing is, Brett Lauderdale, the owner of GCW, paid an upfront deposit for Sabu to be there, $300, and then he didn't upfront. He kept the money, but then he eventually returned the money to Brett, and he didn't show after the deposit. But he eventually returned the money to Brett, and Brett gave it to a nice foundation in the LGBTQ community. So those were the last 2 years as far as him no showing the Indie Hall of Fame. But then, like Jason said, we get to this week, this past WrestleMania weekend, and he wrestled Joey Janela in what was supposed to be his last match. And then an interview came out with Janela. And in the days following the match, Janela did this interview with Phil Schneider of Yahoo Sports Uncrowned. That was published yesterday. We found out about this yesterday. One day after Sabu died at 60 years old, the interview, and particularly Janela's description of Sabu in the hours leading up to and during the no-rope barbed wire match at Spring Break 9, which supposedly was the biggest spring break that Janela did. It's over 2,000 people there for WrestleMania weekend. That was on April 18th. Which he says was embellished as he was trying to add to the lore and the unpredictability of Sabu, has led to scrutiny of the decision to book and go forward with the match. It also led to new statements from both Janela and GCW Brett Lauderdale. This is some quotes from the interview here. This is from Janela. He recounts how the match almost didn't happen due to Sabu's condition in Las Vegas prior to the show. I was fairly confident that he was fine. I was kept in contact with him, and he has a team of people around him, guys this time. They were all saying he was ready to go, that he was going to the gym, he was on this training program. I believed them up until the day of the show. And 2 hours before, I got a call, and they said, Sabu can't walk. So I said, what do you mean Sabu can't walk? They said, yeah, Sabu, something with his knee, they're locked up, he can't walk, his feet are bleeding. He's not coming. Sabu's not coming, I said. So we talked to he talked to Matt Tremont, and Tremont was about to be the replacement for Sabu in case he didn't show up for the match. I feel like this is going to be the most embarrassing moment of my wrestling career, says Janela. There's 2,000 people here. This is one of the biggest spring breaks ever, the biggest crowd, many weekend indie-wise, and I'm going to have to go out there and announce that Sabu once again no-showed, and no-showed his own retirement match. We're an hour into the show, and I said, just get Sabu here. So they gave him something where this is where it gets a little shady, because he did say, get Sabu here. What did they do to get him there? Nobody knows. Just get Sabu here. So they gave him something called Kratom. You can buy it at a smoke shop or something. It's like illegal opium or something. They said he's hopping on the bed, he's hopping off the bed, and we're going to get into the show. So it shows up 2 hours into the show, and Sabu's on a different fucking planet. Everyone in the backstage was like, what the fuck is going on? Is this match even going to happen? And my God, did it happen? So Janela gets into the spot that Jason just mentioned, where he went through the barbed wire and hit the concrete floor on the outside. Janela recounts that. He was definitely out cold. He was done. They were telling me there's no way. The refs were communicating to me that there's no way he's continuing this match. Like, holy shit. That is the one time you want the barbed wire to actually stop you. He just blew right through it. And then the Sandman came out. And that was all Sabu needed. And then the resurrection happened. Jesus resurrected 2 days later, the anniversary. Couldn't fucking believe it, dude. He was ready to go again. I guess the concussion knocked him back into 1996 or something. I don't know. And that was the last quote for Janela. I got that from Cape Shot Seats. I don't know, Jason. I'll let you start off, man, and then I'll get my thoughts. Piggyback off what you say. What do you make of this and the whole Kratom argument online? I never heard of the draw of this, but before this last 24 hours, I didn't even know what the fucking this thing was. What do you make of this entire situation and how this interview came off with you?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Some of the stuff that he said in the interview, I don't know why he would have said that in the first place. I don't think it was wise to say some of the things that he said in the interview, even if this hadn't happened. The timing was just unfortunate because he did this interview in the days after the match, not knowing, obviously what was going to happen weeks later. So the timing was awful. But I just think the whole situation to me is just sad. Now, the one thing I will say is that Janela's been attacked online. There's been a lot of things said about how this led to his death, killed him, which is of course a fucking stupid thing to say. The match at this point happened almost a month ago, and there's no indication connecting, point A to point B. It was just people speculating and saying whatever comes to their mind, and maybe they're just being emotional about the whole thing. But the reality is that, if we're being honest, Sabu had no business being in the ring. That he's an adult, and if he needs a payday and he wants to work, then he's going to work. And there are a lot of wrestlers who, frankly, have no business being in the ring when they're 60 years old, or some people who are even younger than that. But in the physical state that they're in, they probably have no business being in the ring. But anybody who would look at Sabu or any of whatever the last few matches were that he would have had, and then you read what he's talking about here in this article about how, Sabu is hurting and his feet are bleeding, and it's like, this guy shouldn't have been in a wrestling ring. So that just makes the whole situation sad, because this is more of sort of a larger wrestling industry issue, with this whole idea of, the show must go on, and this is just what you do. You got to make your shots, and you got to make sure you show up, because there's people there that are paying money to see you, and what are we going to do? We sold all these tickets. There are certain situations where, that's not the most important thing. And so and it goes beyond just like a Joey Janela or GCW thing. That's just, as a general rule, that's just the way that it should be. And it just doesn't work out that way, unfortunately. So I read that and was just shaking my head. Like, this is a really shitty thing that happened. He's an adult. He can make his own decisions. All of that is true. I think there were other decisions made by people involved here that were not very wise, frankly. But to say that, well, because he wrestled at the GCW show, that, Brett or Janela, they're responsible for his death, I just think it's just a very stupid thing to be said. And Janela posted something on social media kind of explaining how much Sabu meant to him, and he said it's a friend, and obviously he's broken up about the whole situation, as you would expect he would. And he was lashing out at people on social media, which, of course, because he was getting a lot of shit from a lot of different people. Things he said in that interview were very stupid. All right, so he's not innocent as far as that goes. But I think we need to just, this whole argument of, well, this is the reason why Sabu died. Like, you don't know that, and that's a very stupid thing to be saying. We don't even know the cause of death. Yeah. We don't know anything. All we know is that he passed away. Because all the shit that he did over 30 years of his career obviously had nothing to do with how he is physically today in 2025. It's like, well, I said, like, again, he's been a wreck. Clearly, he's been a wreck for a while. So nobody should be jumping to conclusions as far as exactly what did him in until those details are released. I'm sure they will be at some point, but we don't know. So people need to lay off as far as that goes. But if people want to criticize, GCW or Joey Janela or any of the people involved here who got him to that show, then I think that's fair, because you read this and it sounds very predatory. You know what I mean? Like, this guy is clearly not in the right frame of mind. I even made the comment, like, when I saw those clips from the match, I said, I don't know what Sabu was doing before the match, but he was not all there. Yeah. Okay, he was doing something, whether it was kratom or whatever else, and I'm not going to comment on that because I'm not an expert in it. But whatever it was, he clearly was not, he was not there without some assistance of some kind, which is another reason why he really had no business being in the ring. And it's just a really sad situation, because I think you have, in the one case, a guy who probably fell into that old wrestler mentality, and maybe he just wanted the payday or whatever it was, and so he was going to go out there no matter what. It's like a Randy the Ram situation in the wrestling. But then you also have other people involved here who should have, seen this for what it was, and should have been like, you know what, maybe this isn't really a great idea. And this comes off like we have to get him in the ring no matter what. Yeah, that's the way it runs. Like Janela said, just get him here. Like, they gave him kratom, just get him here. Like what? Do what you got to do to get him here, and then I guess we'll just go from there and figure it out on the fly. And it's like, well, dude, I mean, if you're, hearing that this guy is in this kind of distress or bleeding or whatever is going on here, my first thought is, well, maybe we should call an ambulance, or somebody should drive him not to the venue, maybe to the fucking ER, and try to figure out what's going on here. And from what I read there, I didn't get the sense that was the first thought on anybody's mind. The first thought was, how can we get Sabu to the show? And that's just awful. I mean, it just is a really poor look for everybody involved. And there was a report from Fight with the GCW who was embarrassed by some of the comments that were made in that interview, and spoke to Janela, and who knows what came out of that conversation. It was embarrassing. I mean, when you read that, imagine if you're not even like really a wrestling fan or a big wrestling fan, and you read that. Like, I am a wrestling fan, and I read that and I was embarrassed. But imagine somebody reading that who isn't like a huge wrestling fan or knows who Sabu even is, and they're reading this, and what they must be thinking. It's just animalistic. It's like, it's like this is not normal. Like, this shouldn't happen. Now, Janela, like Jason said, Janela did tweet. He says he was devastated over the whole deal, and it's really affected him. Kratom is something Sabu took daily for years. It helped him get off other substances. Sabu loved his weed, and Kratom, his body was wrecked doing what he loved for 40 years. I did this interview that we just read here. 2 days after the match, not knowing what would transpire weeks later, and he said he was knocked out after that spot, and despite being a rough deal,
he was not that. I was trying to add to the lore and unpredictability of Sabu. I love Sabu. He legitimately was my idol growing up and my friend. I just wanted to give him and the fans one last great Sabu spectacle. Brett Lauderdale did tweet out because obviously, like Jason said, Pfeiffer put out something. Brett said that Sabu was his friend as well. To learn of his passing, he says, any suggestion that I or GCW or Joe forced him to do this match, supplied him with substances, or somehow caused his death is irresponsible, disingenuous, hurtful, and false. It's upsetting and discouraging to see people so eager to cast judgment without knowledge of the facts. I would never knowingly put someone who I believed was a danger to themselves or others in the ring, and my track record shows this to be true. I pull people in a public and painful manner from big matches before, sometimes little moments before a match was to begin, and would do it again if I had to. I spoke to Sabu moments before the match, and he was Sabu. He was the same Sabu I had encountered in years past when I participated in his matches as a referee and later as a promoter. He was the same Sabu I met with the following day at WrestleCon, and the same Sabu that made multiple appearances on podcasts and at conventions in the weeks that followed. Now, you know, I guess you could take however you want, you know, Brett Lauderdale's comments there, you know, like Jason also said, if you don't like GCW, you're going to go out and fucking spew what you got to spew. If you're with GCW, obviously you're going to be for GCW, but GCW certainly capitalized on Sabu's name value and everything that Sabu has accumulated, you know, as far as notoriety for wrestling. It's unclear if there was any mistreatment from anybody. We don't know what led this passing. It's not been officially confirmed if this was, you know, aided in his passing. We have no idea. But with that said, you know, the emotional strain, the financial strain that he went through, which was all public, and the physical toll that he worked for 30 years that took on his body, it's obviously reignited some serious discussions now and conversations about how wrestling greats aging, you know, in this particular instance, Sabu in his 60s, you know, a lack of safety. There's no safety net in the independent pro wrestling. And it's a reminder that legends like Sabu, who helped build hardcore wrestling into what it is today, you know, unfortunately, the sadness of his passing, you know, often die without death, without wealth, healthcare, and consistent support. Is this something that's going to now open people to maybe act a little differently, Jason, to look at situations like this with someone who is similar to Sabu at that age and, you know, trying to push them to their limits at that age? Is it going to open people's eyes now to maybe do things a little bit differently?
No. I don't think we're going to see any changes into this. I mean, you have in like the mainstream promotions, the big promotions like WWE and TNA, and even with TNA, they were recently for this blood ban, you know, mention if you want, but in the bigger companies, they have protocols in place where something like this you would never see there. Like, I mean, if he were to show up, let's say, you know, for a match like that, like the chances of them allowing him to go out there are very slim. Now, of course, many years ago in TNA, you had the situation with Jeff Hardy at Victory Road where he showed up, he was clearly in no condition to perform, and they allowed him to go out there, which was a boneheaded decision, and it bit them on the ass. And that was, what, 15 years ago now, 14 years ago. Certain promotions will have policies in place to try to prevent stuff like this, err on the side of caution, because they don't want to be, you know, they don't want to be held responsible if something goes wrong. You want to just look at it purely selfishly. As far as the independent scene, it still is in many ways the Wild West. Every promotion is going to have its own policies. Every promotion is going to be different. It depends what state, as far as is there commission oversight? Is there no commission oversight? I don't know what the situation there as far as the commission or how it is in Nevada, which I think is where it took place. It was in Vegas, yeah. So I don't know how or if the commission may have factored into that or not. I think that going forward, every promotion will handle things the way that they want to handle things. And, you know, if they have somebody coming in who's a legend who's going to be wrestling and they show up, and I mean, unless they are just completely like, you know, tripping over themselves, unable to do anything, and then they're like, okay, we can't let this guy go out there. I'm sure there's going to be future instances where people show up who have no business being in the ring, and, well, they're in the main event or they're on the card and people paid money to come see them, so they're going to perform. You know, if they say they're okay, then I guess they're okay. And you don't have a team of doctors who can pull them aside to go check them out like you would in WWE. So I don't think anything. People may stop now for 5 seconds and think about it and go, okay. yeah, we should probably be a little more cautious. But then going forward, I feel like nothing ever changes. You can probably find situations like this over the years, and you think, well, maybe this should be a wake-up call, but it never is. So, I mean, I hate to say that, but you asking me, do I think this is going to give people pause in the future in a similar type of situation? The people who would not put themselves in this position will not put themselves in this position, and the people who would are going to continue to. And I don't really see anything changing unless they are, again, putting on a show in a state or a place where there are certain parameters that they have to stay within, which would be like, you know, commission type stuff. Beyond that, no, I don't think anything's really going to change. You know, wrestling promoters are going to be wrestling promoters, and unfortunately, sometimes you see what you saw in that match where you just look at the guy and you're like, how is this guy allowed to be in the ring to do, and not just in the ring, but dude, like the kind of match he was doing. You know,
they just went from 0 to 1,000. It's like,
but think about it. Like Sabu is out there, right? And Brett Lauderdale says, "Yeah, I talked to Sabu, and he sounded like Sabu. Like there was no reason for me to be concerned." But like you also have to look at it and go, "Okay, you really know the guy, right? Is Sabu the kind of guy who you think if he felt that he was not 100% and maybe he shouldn't be out there, that he would hold himself from the show?" No. So sometimes like the talents are their own worst enemy, and you have to be better than that. And if you're a promoter, say, okay, you may feel okay, you may want to do this, but you know what? I have to make a final decision. There are also situations, and I don't know because I wasn't in the locker room. I didn't see Sabu. I didn't talk to him that day, but I saw what I saw, and a lot of people did and commented on it at the time. And that's why I said it was very sad. Just to see him out there throwing himself and getting tangled up in the barbed wire and then falling out of the ring. Just, to me, I don't know how he got back into the match after that. But that scared the shit out of me when I saw that. And I'm sure it scared the shit out of Janela too when he saw that. And maybe it's just one of these macho toughness things where, okay, get back in the match. Like, holy shit, this guy's tough. Yeah, well, you don't think about the repercussions of that after. When he goes back to the locker room, what kind of physical things he can do. But having said all of that, again, people online blaming them for his death and they're complicit. Like,
it is a little bizarre that they blame Janela for his death. Like, you can fucking like, Janela's made some questionable decisions and said some questionable things online, but I'm not going to attribute Sabu's death to Joey Janela.
No, I mean to me that's just ridiculous, and we'll find out exactly what happened because he was 60 years old. Obviously, most people do not die at 60. There are other factors involved. We don't know what they are, but it's worth pointing out that in the weeks after that GCW show, it's not like Sabu didn't make other appearances. He did make other appearances at conventions. I think 10 days before his death, he did some podcasts. I saw video of it online. He did a show. So he was out doing other things.
He was right back at WrestleCon the next day.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. He was doing signings, but he did a podcast of some kind within the last 7 to 10 days of his death. So he was still out there and doing stuff. And then this happened, unfortunately. So I just think the timing was very bad. If you're GCW and the timing of that interview coming out when it did, it made it even worse. Because you just read. And Janela can say what he wants about, well, I was lying, I was just embellishing, and he wasn't really knocked out. Like, well, is that the case, or is he just kind of trying to cover his ass now? Well, I mean, we'll never know. But the timing of it did not do him any favor. Let's just put it like that.
No, rest in peace to Sabu. Again, a childhood icon growing up, and obviously influenced the generation. And just a sad state of affairs this weekend. 60 years old. Any more news on whatever comes out of the situation? Jason did mention a TNA bloodline. This is coming from PW Insider. They reported this past week that an internal meeting was held at TNA, indicating that they are no longer permitting blood. So we're told that the company felt like that it went overboard as of late, and said that they wanted it to mean more whenever it was that they decided to do it again. In addition to that, John Alba of Sports Illustrated noted that TNA has been shopping Impact's broadcast rights around, something that PW Insider said that they can confirm they've been doing for quite some time. Alba noted that the edict to eliminate blood could have been a reaction to helping make it more broadcast friendly. So that is the latest there. That's news to me. I didn't really read that report until just now. I agree with the blood ban. If that's the reason, if that's what they're going to go and do and use it when it's most necessary to get more meeting, I absolutely for that, 100%. But as far as the TV rights deal, Jason, if they're shopping around, they got one hell of a roster over there. If they get something anywhere close to like what CW is with NXT, man, we might be having some competition with AEW and TNA for number 2 promotion.
Well, the blood ban, I have no issue with that, and the reasoning for it, I think it makes all the sense in the world. Plus, with the relationship now with WWE, this is not shocking to me. There was a match recently. I know Steve Macklin was involved. It might have been Macklin and Eric Young. They had like a blood ban. I mean, it was bloody, and so I'm not shocked either by the idea of, well, we may have gone a little overboard with that, so we're going to try to tone it down. I always say, like, use it when there is a reason to use it. We got double juice in the match with CM Punk and Drew McIntyre when they did their Hell in a Cell match, right? But it was Hell in a Cell, and it was the culmination of their feud. And it made sense. If you were going to do it, that was the time to do it. Do we see that all the time? I'm just using WWE here as an example. Do we see that all the time in WWE? No. That's why it felt more meaningful.
Well, when was the last time we saw blood inside a Hell in a Cell? It's been a while.
I couldn't tell you. Yeah, no, I couldn't tell you. But as far as this, the TNA thing, from what I read, it's a case where it'll be used sparingly, and obviously if there's hard way blood, somebody gets their skull cracked open. I mean, no one's going to get in trouble for that because stuff happens. But I think it makes all the sense in the world. I think it's smart. I think you don't want to abuse it because when you do it all the time, it loses all meaning. And so what's the point in doing it then? If you're doing it in multiple matches on the same show, or you're doing it every single week, to me it's pointless.
What do you make of the TNA potentially shopping their brand for a TV rights deal, according to John Alba? I mean, with the partnership with WWE, I mean, they have some